Steve, thanks for coming in.
Thanks.
I read that a lot of this record was inspired by when you first came to Nashville in 1973. I want to talk a little bit about that time because I think to me, like who was born after it, it was it seems like such a romantic time. As someone who really loves Billy Joe Shaver, someone who really loves Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, it may as well be Disneyland. Like it may as well have never existed.
Well, it kind of was because it wasn't that moment, but people that go now are kind of, disappointed sometimes. But I got there at a good time. I met Townsend out in Texas in '72, and that gave me an automatic introduction to Guy Clark when I got there. But I had to make a decision. Willie Nelson had moved back to Texas, and so a lot of people were saying, "I'll come to Austin." That was only 90 miles, and the weather was too good, and the dope was too cheap, and the girls were too pretty, and I knew I'd never get anything done there. So I went to Tennessee, and Waylon was there, and it was pretty democratic. There was somebody up at either Guy and Susanna's house or some hotel room with a guitar going around the room every night. And you could walk into JJ's Market and Tom Paul Glaser and Waylon Jennings would be in there on adjacent pinball machines banging away at them at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. There were several places to hang out on the night shift. There was Pete Drake's studio. There was, Hillbilly Central, which was, kind of the nickname for the Glazer studio, and which was right. JJ's was literally across the street, so they were over there a lot. And then Jack Clement's studio, and it was where there was a lot of cool stuff going on at that moment in time, and it was like a salon. There was really, really good, post Bob Dylan, and in Nashville that means post Chris Christopherson songwriters, people that most of them were college educated. I wasn't, but most and Billy Joe wasn't, but most everybody else was.
And like when you were coming in there, these guys were legends already. Waylon Jennings was already an icon by then. Willie Nelson was already an icon then already. When you were walking into these rooms with your guitar, not as well known, did you feel comfortable to sing your songs?
Yeah, sure. It happened all the time. I mean, Waylon and Willie were kind of at the height of their careers, so they weren't around that much because they were on the road all the time. But I was around when Waylon made "Dreaming My Dreams." Like I went over with Paul Kraft, who wrote "Keep Me From Blowing Away." So he'd heard that Waylon had recorded this song and asked me if I wanted to go over there with him. So I went over there and I was there for one of those whole sessions. Those opportunities presented themselves. It was mainly about Guy. And, Guy it took a long time to get Guy's first record made, so he wasn't touring. So I was lucky the first few years I was in Nashville, he was around and all the time. And, we had to find something to do. There weren't that many gigs to play, so we sat up all night and kind of tried to impress each other with whatever we'd written that day. And so it got a little competitive in a very healthy way. And, you wanted to come up with something new, try to impress Guy and Susanna, whoever else was there, which could be anybody from people at street level like me and David Olney and Richard Dobson to Neil Young if he was in town. It could be almost anybody.
That's Guy Clark you're talking about, and Guy is someone who I think he passed 2 years now.
It's last year.
Last year,
yeah.
And when he died, I was trying to impress upon people just what he meant, and I was playing a lot of records for them. But I think that the records are only part of who Guy Clark really was to that time in Nashville.
Yeah, I don't know. His records are pretty good. They're better than Townsend's records were consistently. I think the main thing was he was a teacher to a lot of people, and he continued to be in that role. I mean, he was Rodney Crowell's mentor, my mentor, and then later, a lot of people after that, and he just kept doing that. And then at the end of his life, he started co-writing with younger writers because it kept him writing, and which was something he would never do when I first met him, was co-write. None of us did, but
that wasn't a thing because that's how it works in Nashville now. If you're writing,
it does for the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part.
A lot of folks are going in working 9 to 5, writing with other folks.
People always did that. It just wasn't us that did that. So we were the night shift.
How did the night shift? How did that outlaw movement in 1973 inspire this new record in 2017?
Well, I mean, I just basically I was writing songs for a blues record. On the tail end of that process, I decided I was going to make a blues record, just like I decided, like it's almost 20 years ago now that I was going to make a bluegrass record. But, it was a certain type of song that was going towards that. Sean Colvin and I were writing songs for a record, and that those needed to be songs that lent themselves to harmony because we decided we were going to basically sing together for the whole record. You only hear our voices separately on one song on that whole record. But so, that sort of separated two kinds of songs that I was writing going to two different projects. Then T-Bone Burnett asked me to write a song for the TV show Nashville. And I wrote a song called If Mama Could Have Seen Me. He told me what he needed it for, the character he needed it for, and I said, well, let me see the script, and they sent it to me, and I wrote the song, and he liked it, and more importantly, Callie liked it because she was the boss, and they used it. Then the second season, I've recorded Colvin and Earle by that time, and it's getting ready to come out, and I guess, and Buddy Miller took over as a musical director, and he called me and asked me for a song, so I wrote Looking for a Woman. They didn't use it because Buddy's boss and music supervisor actually vetoed it. I think probably because they didn't have the publishing on it. And it's so I realized, I had these two songs that didn't fit into either one of the other two projects. And well, maybe the next record, I'm going to have to make another solo record at some point. Maybe it's a country record. And I just so happened I was listening to Honky Tonk Heroes because it's just a record I listen to every 10 years. It's like some Beatles records, some Stones records, some Waylon records, some Willie records come back around, and I listen to them over and over again at different points in my life.
It's a really important record. If you don't know Honky Tonk Heroes, this is an incredible album by Waylon Jennings, and mainly songs written by the great Billy Joe Shaver, who's still around, who we played on this show before. When I know that record really, my father was a big fan of that record. I listened to that record a lot when I was growing up, and I was starting to play guitar myself, and I was starting to hear how Honky Tonk Heroes. What are the coincidences between Honky Tonk Heroes and your records? So you want to be an outlaw? Well,
basically, it's not a coincidence. It's unapologetically.
Well, so where do I hear it? Where do I hear Honky Tonk Heroes on this record?
Looking for a Woman to some extent. So you want to be an outlaw. It's really 2/3 of the record. I'm on the back pickup of a Fender Telecaster. It's more electric guitar than I played in a while. I just got really interested more in acoustic guitar for a long time, and my records have been pretty acoustic oriented. There's 3 or 4 acoustic songs. There's a song I wrote for Guy called Goodbye Michelangelo. There's a song that actually Allison Moore, my ex-wife, and my niece, Emily Earle, started, and I was afraid it wasn't going to get finished and nobody was going to hear it, and so I finished it, and that's called News from Colorado. And there's a song called Girl from the Mountain. The rest of it, I'm pretty much on the back pickup of a Tele. We put a steel player in the band again for the first time in a long time, and it's just me unapologetically, doing my best to channel Waylon Jennings through the whole record.
What did Waylon Jennings mean to you?
He was one of a couple of acts that I saw in country music that I knew were different, Johnny Cash being one, from the first time that I saw them. And, of course, I guess the first time I saw Waylon Jennings was probably on TV, and it was probably on, like, the Fair and Young show or something, because there were all these syndicated, country shows in those days. But he played electric guitar, and he was... I got into Waylon very early. He'd recorded MacArthur Park. He had this, he was doing something different than the average country artist was doing, and I just knew he was different, and I always listened to him. I saw him a lot before I moved to Nashville, and I was at the Dripping Springs reunion and the 4th of July picnic. The first 4th of July picnic is in the audience, and. I knew about Billy Joe Shaver before Waylon made a whole record of Billy Joe Shaver records. In fact, Danny Epps, who was in Billy Joe's very first band, didn't make the show at the Dripping Springs reunion because he was under a joint at the back of the audience smoking a joint with me when he looked up and saw Billy Joe on stage. And, it's like I was just there when all this stuff started happening in Texas, and then I went to Nashville and saw what was going on there. And it became this thing of back and forth between Austin and Nashville, for several years. And it's a lot of who I am. And I think the 30th anniversary of Guitar Town, we were out, doing these anniversary shows, and I was writing a lot of this album during that time and trying it out on sound checks. And, and I finally just committed to making it's a country record. It's an archaic country record, but I guess nowadays, but it's a country record.
And Waylon, you and Waylon stayed in touch. I know that in the notes when I was reading the notes to this record, you mentioned that Waylon wrote you while you were in prison.
Yeah, it's weird because we didn't talk the last couple of years of his life, mainly because Ray Kennedy pissed him off, my old partner and engineer, when I produced a version of a song of mine called "Nowhere Road" for the 20th anniversary of the Outlaws, that album, and on Waylon and Willie, and Ray just didn't listen to me when I was trying to tell him about, he was trying to get Waylon to do something that Waylon did not want to do in the studio, and I said, Ray, and then all of a sudden the headphones came off and Waylon was gone, and I never saw him again.
Really?
But he was, he wasn't feeling great in the last few years of his life. He had developed diabetes, and he could be a little grumpy, and I knew it was coming. And if I wish I'd gone out of my way to make amends there. I didn't really do anything, but I just never got the chance. I was on the road and he was on the road, but when I was locked up, he did. Only a couple of people wrote me. He sent me just a note in an envelope. It was it wasn't even really a letter in it. There was just a picture, a photograph, when people still had those someplace besides their phones.
Yeah.
And it was, it just said on the back, I'm wearing the bandana for you. And he had this bright yellow bandana tied around his wrist. And he wore a bandana on his wrist every show that he did during the time I was locked up.
How'd that make you feel when you were in there?
It was a very big deal for me. I mean, I was trying to find a way back by that time. Almost immediately after I got to jail, I got furloughed out to a treatment center, and very, very quickly after I got to the treatment center, I decided that I didn't want to die and tried to do something different. And so I was really actively trying to find my way back by the time, and it was a huge help.
I've read you. I heard an interview with you in the Intercept, and you were talking about how this is an apolitical record for you. But given that you're a very outspoken person, all your records are kind of political. But it's fair to say that this "So You Want to Be an Outlaw" is less overtly political than your.
Yeah,
other
I mean,
work.
it was recorded in December of last year, so we knew what the outcome of the election was. We were in Canada when that happened, which is a good thing, because I might have shot myself if I'd been someplace where there were a bunch of guns running around like there are in my country. But we were in Ottawa the night that Trump was elected, on the Guitar Town anniversary tour.
Were you on stage?
Yeah.
Bonnie Raitt told me the other day that she went on stage thinking that someone would be
Same
president,
with me.
and she walked off.
Same with me. Yeah. And we were all too hooked, so we knew as the set rolled on. It was a 2-set show too, because we came up, played Guitar Town, then we went back and did another set. And the second set was kind of hard to get through because it was starting to look really bad by the time we went out for the second set. I thought about altering this record, but then I decided I'd written it to be a certain thing, and I decided to stick with it. It's the countryest record I've done in a long time. I think the next record is going to be just as country, but way more political.
Where does that fit now? I was thinking about this the other day because, if I look at Chris Christopherson, especially, as you mentioned, that era was kind of the post Bob Dylan, and as you said, post Chris Christopherson era. I read an interview with Chris, and Chris was then speaking out about social issues. It wasn't outside the realm of possibility of songwriters in Nashville to be speaking out either for democratic causes or for working people's causes or for social causes. What do you think? What's the current state of politics in country music?
I don't know that there is one. I mean, there kind of never has been, but not on purpose. It's not that the artists were not necessarily political people. It wasn't encouraged. I don't know. I think you have to give Chris, credit for being his own person, and he wrote songs. He wrote the songs that he wrote, but he always was who he was, and he was really, really well educated, and he was a post Bob Dylan songwriter. He was super smart. He's a Rhodes Scholar for God's sake. And he's like, I don't, I think that whole question of whether not everybody should write political songs, because not everybody does it well.
Yeah.
I do a pretty good job of it, but it still pisses people off sometimes, and you got to make a decision about it. And I don't hold anybody responsible for being political in their music or not being political in music. Nashville, like people talk about the outlaw thing. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this was to set the record straight about what outlaw was. It was a term that came up after it had all really happened, but it was the idea that a lot of people now want to think that that's in terms, especially some artists I meet, think that it's about drugs and behavior. There were always drugs in country music. George Jones was not going to the liquor store at 4 o'clock in the morning on a lawnmower. There aren't any liquor stores open at 4 o'clock in the morning in Tennessee, or bars for that matter. So, I
never thought about that before until then.
Yeah, no, he was George had a freebase thing going on, and but people didn't talk about that, and so the legend became that he was going to the liquor store. So, what Outlaw was about was really it starts because Doug Somm, the late great Doug Somm, as in the Sir Douglas Quintet, told Jerry Wexler that if he was interested in progressive country music, he should sign Willie Nelson, and he did. Mm-hmm. And Willie made Shotgun Willie and Phases and Stages. Waylon heard those records and went in 72 and made Honky Tonk Heroes. It took him till 73 to get RCA to release it. Outlaw was about certain really smart country acts that deserved it, realizing that there were rock acts had artistic freedom that they didn't have, and to try to make that kind of a record for the first time.
Do you feel home in Nashville now when you're there?
God, I've got a lot of history there. I still got a house there. I've never felt at home anywhere but New York City.
Mm-hmm. But do you feel at home culturally there? Like, does Nashville in any way now feel like it did when you went there and it was a magical wonderland in '73?
I don't know that it ever did. I mean, I was uncomfortable there from the beginning, but I was okay with being uncomfortable at that point in my life, so I just didn't really care. Look, even Texas, when I landed in Austin at the airport there, and I walked past that statue of Barbara Jordan, who was, she was. That's the Texas I left. Nobody could imagine a Republican governor in Texas when I left. There'd never been one. And so I don't, things changed a lot in Texas. Tennessee was kind of always conservative, and Texas wasn't. But Tennessee was just sort of that way when I got there. It was very religious. I'm somebody that believes in God, but I don't, the way I don't believe in people trying to foist their idea of morality based on religion on other people. Right. And that happens there a lot. And I watch my friends moving from LA and New York to Nashville under the theory that it was easier to protect their kids from, Baptists than it was gangs. And the truth is, it's kind of a toss up. And, my son, my youngest son is growing up in New York City. That never occurs to him that people aren't all colors and don't speak all these different languages. It's a much more cosmopolitan environment where he's growing up than where my other two sons did. And for me personally, I just reached a point where I got kind of tired of being behind, enemy lines politically. And I want to be able to walk out my front door and see a mixed race, same-sex couple holding hands because it makes me feel safe as white and heterosexual as I am.
But is there a hope? I mean, I know from listening to, Ralph Stanley spoke out for democratic causes when he was in the Stanley Brothers and just out of the Stanley Brothers.
Right.
Jimmy Carter was a supporter of the Allman Brothers Band, Greg Allman, who just passed away.
Right.
I mean, there's no history of people who play Southern music. We'll say Southern music, even though that's a gigantic term. Well, supporting, but do you feel? But if you look at who's making socially conscious music right now, it's all coming out of hip hop mainly.
Yeah.
And are we too far gone with country music? Is that never going to happen?
No, I just don't think that right now country music is there's two kinds of commercially successful music, as far as selling records and in any kind of numbers, and that's mainstream country and hip hop. And mainstream country, a lot of it is hip hop for people that are afraid of black people. So, I don't know that I think it's kind of intentionally apolitical. It's kind of party music right now. The best music coming out of Nashville is being made by women for the most part. Miranda Lambert's last record is stunning. I think the exception is Chris Stapleton. He's great.
Yeah.
It's not about making political music one way or the other. It's just a matter about what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not. I do what I do. I don't apologize to anybody. Guitar Town's a pretty political record, and Copperhead Road's a very political record. So I've always done it. Yeah. And This record, not as much, but I've made other records that were deeply personal that weren't about politics. I made a record of Townes Van Zandt songs because that's part of who I am, so I needed to do that. I made Washington Square Serenade. Gets a little political, but it's mainly about me moving to New York City. So, I don't, you write what you know, and, you do what you're good at. I don't, I do a lot of things. I write books. I've written a play. I'm working on a musical. I paint a little bit, but I know what my day job is, and I know what I was put here to do, and that's write songs. So, but I bring all those things I do in all those other areas back to this, and I'm a better performer on stage since I started acting by far.
Yeah.
I connect with audiences on a way deeper level than I did before I've done the acting that I've done the last 10 or 15 years.
As much as I want to say, I want to hear some more music. As much as I want to say, I can't wait to hear what's next in terms of. I have a feeling the next record you're going to make is going to be pretty. It's going to be kind of political.
Yeah, look, there's no way for it not to be. I'm traveling outside the United States for the first time just since the election. I thought I was going to get to go to. I'm going to London tonight. I thought I was going to go and jump all over my friends about what idiots they were for leaving the European Union, and now now I don't get to do that. There's still idiots for leaving the European Union, but we look stupider. So that's not going to be. It's embarrassing, And he just came back from Europe and made a complete and total ass of himself every single second he was out of the country, and now I got to go. I got to go out there and
the explanation tour.
Yeah, no,
or the apology
see, it's
tour.
not going to work for me to stick Canadian flags all over my stuff at this point because nobody's going to believe it, and I talk like this. So that's one of the
But So You Want to Be an Outlaw is a great record.
I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, it really
this is, it's a really good band. The tour starts in Texas in July, and it'll go right across Canada before it's over with. And we're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to going out and playing the music.